So I want to start off quickly by having everyone introduce themselves. I mean, this panel is about community specifically, so I want to have everyone say who they are and how they're actually dealing with community right now. I guess you've maybe introduced yourself already, but...
Sure, I'm Amy Jo Kim. I'm the CEO of Shufflebrain. We make next-generation brain games, and I've been designing online communities, specifically online gaming communities, for many years, for about 12 years. And I'm dealing with community now in the sense of figuring out what features and systems to incorporate into our games, which are running on social networks, and figuring out how to really deal with the particulars of what community means on social networks. And I'm hoping we'll dig deep into that topic in our panel.
Me too. Mark Pincus from Zynga. I've worked in communities around social networks for a while. I did Tribe before Zynga, and we deal with community now with really two distinct kinds of community. So one is existing communities of people who are friends and are interacting in our games with their friends, and we're really just a vehicle for them to do that. And the other kind of community is more like the kind of community I dealt with at Tribe, which is people who come together and find each other in the games and don't already know each other. So like in our poker game or some of our other live playing games, we're dealing with people who are coming together and meeting for the first time without the social graph in place sometimes. And so that presents interesting challenges, just like you have other times on the web, and we've learned some things and hope to learn more around it.
Hi, I'm Dave Williams. I'm SVP and GM of Shockwave and AddictingGames, which is part of the MTV Networks group now. I've been working in community on the web for 10, 12 years in various ways. And most currently with Shockwave and AddictingGames, we're doing a couple of different things. Both sites have long been big aggregator sites on the web for a lot of online games primarily, but also downloadables on Shockwave. We've started to build, over the last 12 months, community deeply into both sites. We've built out profiles and so on, a lot of other community features on Shockwave. We're starting to take advantage of the power of the community on AddictingGames right now, and we can talk a little bit more about that. And we're also starting to take some of the content we have on our sites and set it loose, both into embeddable games, but also building applications for Facebook and so on, and just stepping into that space really in the last 2 or 3 months.
Hi, I'm Jim Greer. I'm the CEO of Kongregate. So Kongregate is a social games community. It's a destination website with user-uploaded games. So mostly about, I think, 2,200 indie developers have uploaded a little over 5,000 Flash games. And so that's one community. And an intermeshing community are the players. So what we offer for players, aside from all these free games, is essentially like achievements, profiles, ways to show off what you've accomplished in these games, as well as chat and comments and lots of ways to interact with the other players. So kind of Xbox Live for Flash games, to use yet another this meets that analogy. So the community, I guess in Mark's terms, which is a good way to distinguish it, mostly it's people who haven't met before meet playing games and end up being at least online friends. Before Kongregate, I was at Pogo for 4.5 years as the technical director at the end, anyway. Pogo is an amazing community and probably the earliest, really strong, large-scale web games community and a very profitable one as well. So it certainly learned a lot from that, although we're also we're more of a young male site, so some serious differences as well.
So it seems like the people are going in two directions here. One is the aggregate sites, drawing a community to one place, and the other is taking games and putting them onto existing social networks like Facebook and things. What do you which is the sweet spot really? Is it is it better to have your own community or to go into a place where people already exist? That's for, I don't know, I guess Jim, Dave, and Mark all have conflicting.
Right. I guess I can take a first shot at it. I think you have to be everywhere. You have to be everywhere your users are. The web is highly fragmented, search-driven. People are on Facebook, or MySpace. If brands aren't there, I think they're losing an opportunity. AddictingGames is a youth brand. It's the largest teen game site in the country, but we know that our users are doing other things. And our approach is different depending on whether we're talking about our site or if we're talking about our distribution strategy. So, fundamentally, when you go after something like, when a user goes to Facebook, they're going there to socialize. They're going there because they want to be with other people. When somebody goes to AddictingGames, they're going there to play games, first and foremost. And so within AddictingGames itself, we're focusing on community that enhances the gameplay experience, whereas what we're looking at for Facebook is games that enhance the community experience. And it's a subtle difference, but it's an important difference in terms of the kinds of games we put out there and the kind of emotions that we're trying to evoke with the game.
So I'll add, I think we're trying to do the same thing, on the social network. So we think of, I like the way you said it, that's the way we think of it, that we think that games on a social network are a way for people to connect and interact, and that is a bigger driver than people who are really, really into games. But there's also this side of it that I like to say it's like there's people who have this latent addiction that maybe hasn't reached the surface, and they might not realize that they're addicted to certain games or games in general, so they're not seeking out and typing in a destination, but once they are presented with a game, they might become addicted. So I like to say that in the social networks, there's just a lot less barriers and friction, so people can trip over a game through their friends and discover it and get involved and engage. So it's just a more, in general, more the two. I still think there's these two types of gamers, and the kind of gamers that like Jim's talking about. There's like the people who are kind of into games and the community around games, and they're on the social networks, and they're maybe more casual, less friction. And then there's this new meme of people who wouldn't have been into games. The only thing they're into is the fact that they're playing with a friend or something.
Right.
Yeah. I think, not to belabor it, but I do think that distinction makes sense. But so our site primarily is kind of like it's a little bit where hardcore players come to play web games in a sense, and it's young and it's male. But we've just launched 7 games on Facebook, and it's basically trying to introduce people who should get that stumbling across our games effect. So yeah, I think that the games that have gotten really big on Facebook are the most casual games: poker, Scrabble. But now you're seeing some other stuff. Who's got the biggest brain? Nobody knows that game yet. It turns out to be something that's really easy and fun to play, and it has gotten really big as a result.
Jim, with your site, it seems like you're almost merging the two because the games essentially become a vehicle for a different style of social network, since they can actually chat while they're playing and make friends and things like that. So obviously you have to monetize these things differently. So having them all centralized versus actually putting it on Facebook, is that actually? Do you have to have different models for both of these things?
Yeah, and really we're mostly trying to make the money on Kongregate.com, and we're putting our games in other places to kind of make people aware and bring them back to our site. But yeah, we're trying to do a mix of integrated advertising that's kind of deeply integrated into the site in ways that make sense. Sponsored prizes that you can win for playing games, sponsored game contests, things like that. And also we're building out microtransactions. I think that the people who will some percentage of people playing any game would be willing to pay a little bit more for premium stuff. I think that I think that those will do better on destination sites than on social networks because you've already pre-selected for people who are a little bit more into it. So I don't think that we would ever do that on Facebook. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and just to add an analogy to that, to what you just said, Jim, there's the New York Times crossword puzzle, and that's a puzzle that's inside of a larger thing. But there's also, you can go down to the newsstand and get a crossword puzzle book or, book of bogglers or that sort of thing. So I don't really think it's either or, like either or is going to win. I think that if you're going to be putting your games onto a larger site like Facebook or, doing a syndication deal with iVillage or anything like that, you're going to be reaching a wider variety of people. But the people who are really into it will always, as you say, go to the destination sites, and that's where they're going to find more people like them to connect with.
Yeah, definitely. We do a lot of research and talk to teens in particular and ask them, one of the questions we ask them is, would you rather play all your games on Facebook or MySpace, or do you want a games destination site? And conversely, if you're on a games destination site, do you want it to become a social network? And the answer is always, no. They want a games destination site and they want a social network. They're open to community features on a game site that help enhance the gameplay. Either, whether that means I can play against my buddies, or I can see what my buddies like and find new games that way. I can build up a profile with points. All of those kinds of community things help enhance the gameplay, but they don't fundamentally want to take a site like AddictingGames and make it their social networking site where they hang out and go every day to hang out and chat with their buddies.
Yeah.
Do you find that people actually do click through from the Facebook app to get back to the aggregate site? Like, is that actually happening?
To a certain extent. I think it's partly click-through, partly branding. We do a lot with embeddable games, and not just Facebook and MySpace. And the reason for that is kind of like Jim said, it's marketing. We expect click-through, but it's also about getting the brand out there. And the money we make is almost, at this point anyway, exclusively on the site. So it is about ultimately bringing people back. But we're investing in marketing. These are great channels for us to be marketing our brands in.
One curious thing I noticed is that there's a game called The Last Stand that's run by both Kongregate and AddictingGames, and that has an embedded Flash ad for another portal in it. How does that work out for you guys?
So the Flash games world is something I didn't really know very much about until I had a Flash games. Like even when I was at Pogo, I didn't know, but very common. So I guess the historical center of it was Newgrounds, and Newgrounds doesn't really pay out any revenue. So the reason you upload a game to Newgrounds if you're in business is to promote something else. And so there's a tradition of teenage kids making games, getting sponsored by AddictingGames or Kongregate or whoever, and driving traffic that way. And so we allow those sponsored games on our site as well. Our sort of philosophy about it is just, in general, we want to be open and let developers make money. We also think that we'll retain traffic. If we're both running games for each other's sites, we're going to retain that traffic better because of the community features on our site. It's sort of our thesis about it. But yeah, you can play in general, not a lot of our games are exclusives currently. We're building out more of a developer platform, multiplayer, microtransactions, things that will hopefully give us natural exclusives, but we don't really get exercised about that.
Did you want to?
I was going to say, fundamentally, the reason the Flash developers want to get their games on AddictingGames is first and foremost, it's exposure, and if they want to bring people back, if they want to build their brand as a developer, we allow some of that. It's more of a mix for us. We definitely are more focused on building exclusive games, but it doesn't all have to be that way. We just need enough content that is differentiated in our own to differentiate the site overall, but it doesn't all have to be something that we own outright or have exclusively.
Although I will just take this opportunity to say we allow games that advertise AddictingGames on Kongregate, but the reverse is not true. Although they do allow other sites, I think they're a little bit more threatened by us than some of the other Flash game sites out there.
We allow game developers. We do allow game developers some branding. Other portals or destination sites, it's a little harder strategically for us to figure out why that makes sense.
So speaking of platforms, do there exist right now APIs to build one game and propagate it across multiple social networks? Or does that have to be individually done still at this phase if you want to get on MySpace, Facebook, etc.?
Is there one? No. I mean,
Yeah, you pretty much need to roll your own, especially since everything's changing.
is your question, can you build a game once and then publish it to every social network?
Right, yeah. Or
no, and even with open social, you need to do, I think probably most people here know that, right? That you have to do different development around the wrap around your game for every network you're on.
Okay.
But open social is a great promise.
What sort of technical challenges do you need to surmount in order to build a successful community? It's kind of a vague question in a way, but in terms of actually making sure that users are able to successfully, meet each other or successfully share games and...
Well, I'll give you one answer to that. So when we first turned on chat on our games on Facebook, we were the only live games and the only live games with chat. And the first thing that people do, usually when you let them chat, is be abusive to each other. And they have a lot...
Or do an age, sex check. Age, sex, location?
ASL?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pent-up demand for people to be abusive. And I started watching in some of our games, what would happen, it was almost like watching Animal Kingdom, that there'd be a bunch of guys at the table, and they'd be just playing poker or whatever, and a girl or a picture of a girl would show up, and all of a sudden they'd just flip out and start being vicious, not just to each other, but to her. So, and just really awful. So I'd start talking and be like, dude, that's no way to meet a girl, and just try something else. So I realized pretty quickly that they just didn't know how to start a conversation. They got frustrated. So we turned on drink gifting and chip gifting. And it brought our abuse down. Abuse complaints went down 80% as the application grew 4 or 5x. And now I go in games and I'll see a hot girl come in, or a picture of a hot girl, and she'll just get stacks of chips given to her and mojitos and drinks. So
that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces in building a community, the presence engine, the chat, all that stuff. It's just there's a lot to build. But the thing is we've seen the same thing. There's pent-up demand. People really badly want to talk to one another online, and particularly on game sites. So the moment you open up a channel, whatever that channel is, people are going to pile in, and someone will find a way to abuse it. And so we're constantly surprised by the kinds of things that people do, spamming our message boards, whatever it might be that we have to. So it's a game of catch-up all the time. You have to try and anticipate as much as you can, but it's always a lot more work to stay on top of it once you've opened up the channel than you think it'll be.
Yeah. So I mean, I think those are both true. The other thing is that the particulars of your community, like little subtle things, like whether a picture of somebody's face is in there or whether you have just a little avatar, really changes the dynamics of things and the way people interact. So we don't have, most people, you can upload a picture, most people don't. I mean, the other thing we do is we have some automated tools, but a lot of what we do is give users tools. So we have moderators, and we have ways of reporting abuse, and they're pretty obvious. But it has a nice corollary benefit, which is that our ratio. So we have 2,000 people who have made games, roughly, out of about 3.8 million people who come to the site every month. So very few people are contributing to the community in that way. But hundreds of thousands are contributing by being active in chat or helping other people out in chat, and so that actually creates loyalty to the community as well. Pogo, unfortunately, when it was acquired by EA, had to go from having sort of volunteer guides. EA's legal department didn't like that, and so now it's all outsourced to India, and they do fine, but it's not the sort of same kind of nice grassroots feel.
And the other thing is, community is such a broad term, it's almost meaningless. It's, like if you say, if you ask yourself, what is the goal, the social goal that people have in engaging in my game or in my set of games? People have really different goals. Some people really want to connect more deeply with people they already know, particularly people that they might already know that they don't see as often as they'd like. So that's one thing that games can deliver. Some people really want to meet new people, and they're open to that, and they have the time and the space in their lives for that, and that's a different kind of a goal. Some people really want to use conversation. We've been talking about community as conversation, talking, chatting, on message boards. But community can also be sharing things you've made, like the games on Kongregate. Community in our games, there isn't any chat, but there's a lot of content sharing, in particular sharing your personal photos in the context of playing games. And that's a very different kind of a form that's probably much more meaningful for people trying to connect with each other. So I find it's really helpful to use words like your network, your friends and family, your extended college community, et cetera, to be a little bit more specific than the word community, because that can get misconstrued, and it's just so broad.
Yeah, just to add on to that, even taking it down a level on something like we were talking about photo upload or avatars, right? Even on something that specific as a part of community, it totally depends on your demo, on what people want. So kids under the age of 13 don't want photos. They want avatars. They want little pictures. Women, the soccer mom, casual game player, they're mixed. They have, some of them just want avatars, some of them want pictures. Teenagers all think they're beautiful. They all want pictures, right? They want photographs. They want to be able to upload photographs, and that's a part of the experience. And it's very clear as you age up, as you talk to teens as they get older. 13-year-olds kind of want them. By the time that you get to the 17-year-olds, they absolutely want photographs.
Right.
Can you maybe address it? I know you deal with UI a lot. Can you address it from that perspective in terms of, obviously, it's very different having chat versus forums versus propagating Facebook apps in terms of keeping that kind of integrated for a brand?
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you.
Oh. So I'm not sure what the question is.
Oh, in terms of keeping your branding consistent across these things and the user interface kind of, well, does it even matter if you have a similar kind of UI across these different community vehicles, or?
You mean if you've got a game that's on a lot of different sites?
Well, I mean, if your brand, say Kongregate, is doing aggregated content and Facebook stuff, and then you also have forums and you have chat for the the user experience. How do you make sure that is all concrete and lets everyone know that you're dealing with Kongregate? Maybe I should ask you.
Yeah, I mean, so we I guess on Facebook, we're not super heavy with our brand, and we also don't have, like, for instance, on Facebook, we had to decide, should we have a Kongregate arcade or should we have individual games, right? Yeah. And the jury's still out, but our initial release was with individual games because we sort of felt like, Kongregate arcade doesn't make me want to click. Dolphin Olympics, what the hell is that? That's so we made that decision. We also don't do chat on Facebook currently. We could, but it's really the experience there is about challenging your friends, beating your friends' score, so it's kind of an asynchronous. You care more about, I want to play with this particular person because it is somebody that I know, as opposed to on Kongregate where it's more of a larger group of fellow gamers. You don't necessarily want to wait around for your one friend. So chat becomes more appealing in that context. But we don't really, I guess we don't approach very many things thinking about our brand, really. We're more, our brand is like a YouTube or something like that. It's like a place and not as more than like, an iconic brand.
For Mark, does it matter for you if people know that it is your company that is making these games, or does it just matter that that the games themselves become popular for you?
We definitely think that it's important that there's a branded experience that our users know and start to expect that certain features are there and functions, and we're investing far more in that going forward. We've had some awesome people joined the company in the last 4 or 5 months who are driving a lot further on the community experience. I think we've had a good start at it so we have, we call it our Z-bar that's across the top of all of our games and apps and our partners. And that is getting well known by our users already, so that the brand isn't a big part of it. It's more of a social utility, and it's letting you see that your friends are online now to chat or play, challenge them, or join them, and it's showing you kind of a game feed of what they've been doing, and then it also promotes a lot of other games for you to try that are part of the network. But there's interesting challenges around it. So for us, like we have a partner network that has APIs, and people can join and share traffic and share the social functions we have. But then for us, the tough part is that users don't know the difference. So one thing that I stepped into yesterday was I got an email from one of our engineers who's more up on blogs than me, and he's in the audience. Justin, thank you. And I got this email saying that I had been kind of slammed on this Jewish something for Israel blog, and that Mark Pincus with his Zynga games is promoting jihad terrorists. I was like, wow, I didn't know I was doing that in one of my games, and I looked, and it was this game from one of our partners. Armies from Frozen Bear apparently had, like, their users had created these jihad terror groups or something, as probably a joke or something. But so I was like, oh my God, I didn't do that. And they're like, well, but it says Zynga at the top, so it was reasonable that they thought that. So there's interesting challenges around maintaining a branded experience across different networks and with a lot of partners.
But what do you have to do in a scenario like the one you just described?
Take the game down.
Yeah,
we took it down, and I posted back to their blog and said that it wasn't our game, and that we thank them for bringing it to our attention. But it brings up, I mean, there's the TOS of the host network, and then there's our own TOS, and so we have to deal with that. But even beyond obvious things like that is, you have to really think about the quality of all the games that you put out and all the touch points, and then your partners as well. And we are investing far, far more and taking it more seriously. So I think that this whole industry, and it's really cool that this is an industry now, and there's all these people here. I think that we're entering the next generation, and it's moving so fast. It feels like we're entering the second chapter of social gaming, where the production values of what we put out and the branded experiences and that we're all going to really worry about is going up massively. And I think that we're moving from this embarrassment of riches, where it was so easy to get viral and it was so easy to add 100,000 users a day on a good game or what app, that you didn't have to worry so much about having this awesome, branded experience with great retention. That on a destination site is a much bigger concern, because it's a lot harder to get your users. And so I think we as an industry are probably going to move from 2-week or 3-week development cycles to 2 to 3 months.
Yeah. I think we're very focused on brand, and it's not so much about name recognition, though obviously that's part of it, or even traffic back to the site. It's about, brands are fundamentally about setting expectations. So any brand you can think of, we all have values that we associate with them. So we are really working hard as we build out our communities, both on the site and extending it, to have some consistency, both in look and feel, but also in the kinds of experiences, like how do our high scores work, right? There should be consistency whether you play the game on Facebook or you play it on the site. AddictingGames is kind of the wild, wild west of Flash games. There's sort of all kinds of wild stuff on there, and that's part of the brand. Shockwave, on the other hand, has a much higher quality bar in the sense that we're very rigorous about the testing and depth of the games that we put on the site before we put them up, and as a result, we take a lot longer to produce those games and produce far fewer of them. for that site, but that works for that audience. So, I think that whenever you're working on this, the brand has to be at the forefront. Not just because it's about getting the name out there, but because the brand is ultimately what you test everything you do against, in terms of does that meet the values.
When you're on something like Facebook or MySpace, how is there any safeguarding that you have to do against griefers and predators and things like that, or is it all on the site, or is like where is the line drawn community-wise?
So you're saying how much is it that they're responding versus us?
Yeah.
It's really like 98% us. I mean, something has to really escalate by the time users are contacting their support. I mean, most users don't know, as much as you try to brand yourself or have a differentiated experience, most users just don't get that this is another company. I mean, they think, like they're like, you're Facebook Poker, you're Facebook Blackjack. I mean, so they think that they're talking to Facebook, which means sometimes we get complaints about Facebook. But so we have to spend more and more time dealing with that. And that's when I said that there's these two different kinds of community that we are growing up to deal with. It's night and day. When it's you playing with your friends, I mean, I don't know if there's ever a complaint. It's like, I don't think we need a customer support person to respond to the like one email a year we might get from your friend being mean to you or something. But on the public community side, it's way more challenging. And just like you're saying, it's people doing any bad thing they can think of, phishing for accounts and lots. So, but the wins are when we can find a productized way to deal with it instead of brute force. So when we can get there in the product way and not through technology or throwing more people at it, or when you're in the arms race with the griefers, it's a losing battle.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Absolutely.
cute things you can do, like have if more than half of the people in the room mute somebody, they get kicked out.
Yep, we've tried
that kind
that.
of thing.
Yeah.
But then they find that out, and then what they do is they all get in the room, and then when the hot girl comes in, for some reason they all boot her out.
Yeah.
It's probably the same reason that 9-year-old boys give the hot girl a wedgie.
I mean, we've been surprised that when we do get a lot of griefers, and it is a constant battle, and we're trying to figure out how to productize the control of that. But we have also been pleasantly surprised that users, even the teenage boys on Addicting Games, are pretty good about reporting abuse and escalating things. So we are able to trust the community. We don't have to monitor everything that's going on the site because we're going to hear from the community if something is becoming a problem for the most part. On Shockwave, it's really, again, a little bit different of a demo there, but people really police one another on that site. And the moment there's a problem, we hear about it. So it's just about having the tools to respond to that, whether we need to cancel their account or whatever it may be, kick them off, give them a warning. So as long as we've got the tools for the users to be able to self-police, it works pretty well.
Do you all use community managers or equivalent?
Yeah.
Yeah. In traditional game development, there's customer service, and there's marketing, and there's community managers. And community managers are kind of like in between, but sometimes leaning toward marketing, sometimes toward community. Customer service. Where do you all put them in your spectrum?
Well, I would say, I think that the business that we're all in is a lot more like eBay than it is like Pogo. So, or like the traditional game industry. I think this is a lot less of build it and then just get it out and have people use it. And it's more like, it feels to me more like an e-commerce system.
Like a service?
Yeah, and so the community manager takes on a much different role because one part of what they're doing is similar, and they're kind of acting like the front lines of your product and your marketing, and there's these features or complaints or blah, blah, blah. And then there's refereeing in the community and that kind of stuff. But then there's dealing with other things that are much more real time. That I mean, the volumes that we're dealing with, and the number of networks we're across, and the complexity of things that can go wrong, they're a little bit more sometimes like an operations manager too in our business.
Yeah.
So I mean, we don't have any dedicated. We're 16 people as a company, so that kind of hierarchy doesn't really exist. We also have basically 2 community managers and 200 user sort of super users who are moderators, maybe more than that at this point. So the griefing and stuff is handled by the moderators. Basically the support guys or the community manager are mostly doing email and like moderating the moderators to some extent, although we need to kind of automate that a little bit more now. And we don't really have marketing at all.
Yeah.
So.
Our customer support team is sort of our community team as well. They really monitor everything that's going on the site. They handle any kind of customer issue, whether it's someone who's having a problem buying a game off Shockwave or someone who's causing trouble in a chat room. At least for now, whether that scales in the long run or not, I don't know. But for now, it's actually great to have one team that can represent the voice of our users to us, and we kind of check in with them and say, what are you hearing? What's going on? And they can tell us everything from common technical issues that people are running into to the kind of griefing that people are reporting. So it's nice to have that centralized.
In terms of marketing, without having a marketing budget, you must rely mostly on viral spreading. But is there any kind of influencing that you can actually do within the community to make that spread more?
Sure. I mean, we definitely, we have the send to your friend button. You get referral points for people who sign up from that. There's a very prominent dig button with a count of the number of digs above each game. But we've done a lot of simple stuff. I don't think we've done as much as we could or should to really focus on that. And I wouldn't actually say that Kongregate is in any sense viral at this point. We have hit games that drive traffic, and we retain some of that traffic, and then we have more hit games. But it's not really like a, one person, we have 10 people see the invite and 3 accept, and each of them invites 8, and all that, kind of super virality.
One of the things, go ahead.
I was going to say, we don't actually do a lot of traditional marketing either, and in fact, our whole community strategy is really an extension of a marketing strategy. Fundamentally, the site's about playing games, and while we are enabling some community functionality so that people, whether it's multiplayer games, or buddy-based high scores and things like that, some of those are around the gameplay. A lot of it is just literally about retention and getting people to say, hey, I'm going to be playing on the site at this time. Come join me. And that is a way to get people to come and get people to stick. And we've only been we've had probably 8 months of profiles, and we've built it over time up on Shockwave right now, and we've seen time on site increase about 30% as a result of that community, even though it's only actually a tiny proportion still of the overall audience that's participating in that community. It's made it feel like a gathering place. People given the site some soul, even though the primary reason people are still coming to Shockwave is single-player games. So.
One of the things that's really nice in terms of marketing and viral spread about being on a social network site versus being on a destination site, as you mentioned at the beginning, is the newsfeed and just the power of the newsfeed. And if you look at the way community dynamics have changed in the last 10, 20 years, we have now a lot of tools that give us this sense of, what you could call ambient intimacy, where you see the status updates of people that you're loosely associated with, and you see the apps they're installing, and you see the pages they become a fan of. And when I see that 3 of my friends have installed an app, that's really interesting to me, even if I don't know them that well. And I think that is an emerging form of not closeness, but of connection among groups of people that share interests that essentially is doing its own form of marketing, but it's very different than the invite system that so many people hate, myself included, because I get spam with all these invites. Yeah. The news feed, I choose to read it, I choose not to read it. It aggregates it with, if multiple people have done something. And so for us, what we're really looking at is how do we leverage that? How do we make sure that what our app puts out to the news feed is as interesting and compelling as possible? And we essentially aren't doing any marketing and don't plan to do any for a while till we see how that plays out. But that's, for us, one of the biggest reasons that we're choosing to launch our first games on a social network is that kind of built-in opportunity.
So we call that momentum marketing. So we definitely think that, especially on the social networks, that the most powerful way to spread is broadcasting the momentum, and that's why. What we do is, like in our Z-Bar, we let you know, hey, all your friends are trying this new game. Another one of your friends is playing this game, and so you feel this kind of preponderance of, oh, I should check this out because all these friends are trying this. So. And we try and do that through, so we have this API, so every time they use it, it sends another little game feed item to you, and it's going to go through all those. So it's based on the reality of what they're doing, not just installing, and it's really effective. We get a 6% click-through rate on our news feed in our game bar. So.
It's also kind of a natural extension of like the traditional game space where do you buy a PlayStation 3 or a 360? It depends on what your friends have. So
exactly.
Yeah. The other thing about those news feeds is that the trend is for them to open up to sites outside, destination sites as well. So I expect that, playing a game on Kongregate, if you've chosen to, tie Kongregate to your Facebook account, will have the same abilities that an application on the sites will. So I think that's because Facebook and the other places want to be the center of your whole life, not just your Facebook life. So we're looking forward to that.
So how much tracking of user data can you actually do with your games, and to what degree is it acceptable for each of you? It's kind of a difficult question.
I mean, personally identifiable information, we don't obviously do a whole lot with that, but I mean, the tracking is not the challenge. It's the sorting of the data that is the challenge. There's reams of data that you can get, and we use Omniture on both our sites, and it's amazing the depth that we can get into in terms of what the patterns are through the site, the play patterns, which games they're playing, how long they're playing them, all that stuff. So there's a tremendous amount of data. It's all about figuring out what are the metrics that are really driving the business, so that you know which pieces to focus on, because it's overwhelming the amount of numbers that you can get at.
Yeah, it's we get so much data coming in that it's the same point. But we think about there's some data that is really fundamentally important to the users and their friends in terms of persistent state information that's part of your profile, that's your win-loss percent and leaderboards with your friends and that kind of information. And then there's other data that can have socially relevant use, and that sometimes is limited by the TOS of the host network. Like on Facebook, I think it's like 24 hours that you can, it's 24 hours that you can keep a session key open. But the data of what the user does in your app or in your game, you can keep that information as long as you want. You can't keep information about the users beyond what they did with you.
What are you actually allowed to do with it?
What are you allowed by?
Well, I guess within your personal, your own company, what are your standards for okay, we can go this far?
Well, we don't have because we're on top of social network. We don't have your email address or that kind of information. So we're not really getting personal information about you other than what we grab from the API when you show up. That we see your UID, attach it to the information of what you've done in the game, your state, and grab your name and picture. So it isn't really that much of a question for us. I mean, it's just what do we think is relevant to you in the game, but there isn't information we have that we store in a database that we can then use for some ulterior marketing purpose.
Okay. As a final question before we go to a Q&A, where do you see the space going from a community standpoint in terms of, will there be consolidation of aggregate sites? Will there be more propagation into social networks? Where is it going to go from the standpoint of community?
So I guess I'll talk about our site and our plans more than industry trends. I mean, we want to have sort of deeper, richer experiences, more multiplayer experiences, more community in the game. Right now we have community around the games. We're sort of massively single player in a sense. And we're building out multiplayer infrastructure. I mean, the other big goal for us is we have maybe 1% of our developers who are actually making a living on making these games. It's very different for people who are developing for Zynga, although it's similar for AddictingGames, I think. Mostly, so we're trying to fix that basically. So we're successful when at least 10% of them are making money or something like that. In terms of broadly, will there be fewer Flash game portals? There's certainly a lot of fragmentation right now. There's a lot of sites that aren't really very distinct from each other in any meaningful way as well. So there'll probably be some. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a lot of sites are indistinguishable from one another. I think the communities will really help distinguish actually which ones win in the long run. I think that is going to be a really key part of this, as well as the content, obviously. I think it's pretty clear that as big as Facebook and MySpace are, and as much as they are trying to be your whole life, people want games dedicated sites, and I think that there's going to be a lot of room for continued growth in that market. The games we're seeing are getting so much better. We're seeing a lot of, I think people are really getting good at developing Flash games quickly. The quality is getting higher. Things you can do are improving. So I'm really bullish on the long-term opportunity for this space. It just is a little crowded right now. I mean, there's just a lot of people playing in it, and I think it's going to be challenging.
One thing, I want to give a plug for our party that we're throwing at 6 o'clock over our building near here, over on Vermont between 16th and 17th. Hope everyone can make it and talk to us more. That was like an advertorial. I think that community on this side of public games and not games people are playing with their friends, I think that community will be the biggest distinguisher of the winners, one of the biggest in the persistent state games. So I think World of Warcraft is the first example, not an anomaly. You didn't think I was done with the point.
So for us, we're doing something a little different, which is our strategy is we're more focused on people playing with other people they know, and we're looking at having our games be wherever those people are, whether it's on MySpace or Facebook or a destination site like Shockwave, and to have an integrated back end so that people can play with each other asynchronously, but play with each other, and it doesn't matter where they are, and they just don't have to go get a Facebook account if they don't have one in order to play the game and enjoy both competing and sharing their personal content with other people. And so that's kind of a different approach. But that's personally where I see things going, and I've seen some other signs that lead me there. But I think what you guys are probably hearing from this panel is that there's no one answer to that. We're at the beginning of a really exciting and potentially explosive sector of the gaming industry that's embracing this area outside of the gaming industry. And there's going to be a lot of different models and a lot of different ways to play. It's absolutely an international phenomenon. It's not just going to be in the U.S. And I think that we're all really lucky to be alive and participating in this because it's going to be all these things and things that we haven't even dreamed of yet in terms of distribution models.
Lucky to be alive, especially. We've got time for a couple of questions. If there are some, there is a man with a mic in the back. There's one right up here.
I had a question about episodic games. That's a big buzzword in kind of the more standard gaming industry. Episodic games. So we're talking about creating community outside of the games themselves, and I'm just wondering if that's something you guys have thought about. For instance, a game that has some kind of tale, you're still playing a game, but it evolves through a story arc, and maybe you get an episode every month, say on Shockwave.com or Kongregate, or even through Facebook. Although I think this is more of a single-player experience I'm talking about.
We're big fans of episodic games. I think one of the things that's been hard in the game space, in the online game space, is building brands around games, and episodic content is a great way to do that. And we're playing around both on Shockwave with franchises like Care of the Caregiver, which is both an online and a download game. We've done 3 versions of that now. On AddictingGames, we have these flirty little games, which we call the naughty games, and it's naughty teacher, naughty gym teacher, naughty babysitter, and they're flirty little games that 15-year-old boys just love, and we're seeing an audience developing around that, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity to start developing brands and differentiate around episodic content.
Yeah, you just have to figure out the model right. There were some experiments a few years ago. Majestic was one, where if you're trying to get people to solve a story together or to solve a mystery together, that's really tricky because of cheating and pacing and all that kind of thing. So if you're really looking at episodic games and saying, how do you build community around it, you really have to think about the model for community. Are the people, what is it that people are doing together? Are they just chit-chatting about the show? Because at that point, it's really like a show. Are they participating? Are they affecting the storyline, et cetera? And affecting the storyline is tricky when it's multiplayer. Like voting on which way the story should go. Plenty of people have made that mistake. Let's make some new mistakes.
One other thing I'd throw in there on this topic is daily play. So that's something we're seeing on Shockwave, and we're seeing it actually in a wide range of different kinds of play types. There's daily jigsaws, daily crosswords, Sudoku, and so on, but we're also seeing we have a game on the site, Drift and Burn 365, which is basically a new racing track every day, and it's phenomenally popular. People come back every day and they just want to get the new track and play it. So
yeah, and that's the kind of episodes that I think make more sense for community. It's like something new to do every day as opposed to a new episode in a story that has a plot. Like that doesn't fit in as well with most of what we're doing. Although I just bought the Penny Arcade, first in their series. I hope that does well. So.
One more question? If there is one.
Nope.
I guess we are good. All right. Thanks very much.